I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for nearly 20 years at this current point in time. And with that being said, that means that I've made a lot of mistakes not only as a dungeon master, but as a player as well. So today, what I wanted to do was kind of just talk about the main mistakes that I made as a dungeon master. Now, I'm going to kind of just dive straight into this so that way I don't bore you with all the semantics, but we'll go straight into it. First off, what we're going to be looking at is the D20 rule, what a nat 20 means. Now, most people will say a natural 20 is a Dungeons and Dragons rule term for rolling a result of 20 on a 20 sided die, the maximum possible value before any bonuses are applied. When you roll a 20 on a 20 sided die without adding any modifiers, this result generally signifies a critical success, particularly on attack rolls. Now, if you have ever played Dungeons and Dragons before, you probably know that there's two ways that people usually rule this depending on how your table works. And those two ways is one is you roll and it doubles whatever your roll is, and the second one is where all of the stats for whatever the attack roll would be are just maxed out. For example, if it's 10d3, some people would say, okay, you do 30 damage plus your modifier, but some people would say, no, you're still going to roll your 10d3, and then you're going to multiply that by 2. And that's how I personally have always done it because I think that is the most fun. But one of the biggest mistakes I have ever made is advantage. So when I started playing 5th edition, advantage became a very big thing in Dungeons and Dragons at that time, and it became very difficult to play against advantage, especially when you have been playing editions like 1st edition, 2nd edition, and advance, where advantage really isn't a thing. You just roll your die and that is it, really. So there was some rules with advantage that I personally didn't really understand. For example, what would happen if someone rolled two nat 20s? There's a 1 in 40 chance that someone rolls two nat 20s. It's probably even lower than that realistically. It's probably like 1 in 400 chance that someone rolls two nat 20s on a advantage roll or on a disadvantage roll. And for that, for me personally, I decided there should be a special ruling behind that. So, what me and my players originally agreed to back when we first started playing 5th edition is if you roll two nat 20s, whether it's disadvantage or advantage, if you roll two nat 20s, you can double your damage and double it again. So you would roll your base dice, let's say you get a 12, and you would double that, that would give you a 24, and then you double that again, giving you a 48. And originally, I thought, wow, this rule is pretty cool. And then insert my dad. This absolute goober goes, yep, I'm playing a monk, and I remember the day. He stunning striked my enemy, and he rolled two nat 20s, and I was like, oh no. Oh no, my monster is cooked. Mind you, this monster probably had 400 HP, and since he doubled his damage and then doubled it again, I believe, if I remember correctly, he did 296 damage in one turn. And if you have ever played Dungeons and Dragons, basically that is the moment where the DM just took a massive dookie in his britches and he is scrambling to maybe increase the monster's HP because he didn't realize that that was going to happen. And it's kind of scary when that happens when you planned an encounter that was supposed to last 2 hours. And it is just always the funniest things like ever, right? Like simple stuff like that doesn't seem like it matters until it really does in Dungeons and Dragons. But as a dungeon master, I always feel like it's easy to make those decisions in the moment, and then you have to kind of explain to your players later why you have to take it away. Now, I will say that I got fairly lucky with my players in the sense where when I started taking away doubling your double damage, they understood, especially after my dad hit that crazy stat. And then I also had another one of my friends after that hit a similar stat who was playing a paladin. He hit a double critical on a smite on a long sword. That absolutely threw me through an entire wall when that happened. I believe it happened in the same day. Like, that's how absurd it was. And I know there's people who are going to say, wow, that must be fake. But genuinely, when you play Dungeons and Dragons a lot, there just ends up being some moments where you have no clue how this could happen in the entire history of the entire universe. And you have to question your entire sanity as a DM if what you're doing is proper. It is just one of the most hilarious things because on every single DM's face, I can tell you exactly what it is when it happens. If you were a DM and you were running a game and you just saw someone hit for the 296 damage on a double nat 20 roll, your entire look is, and your players know that you were not ready for that. And it adds such a good time to it, which is a perk. But I don't recommend any DM doing this unless you're running a very, very high difficulty campaign, because this is something that only works if your monsters have crazy health going into late game. In early game, it doesn't really matter, but in late game, your players will just absolutely decimate through stuff. And if you're a player, recommend it to your DM. They will probably say no, but it doesn't hurt to recommend now, does it? Now, you might be thinking, wow, what could be worse than that, right? And I'm telling you, the next thing I'm going to talk about is 10 times worse. So, I gave my players something called the Gravity Loader. This is a specialty item I made myself, and it was basically meant for a artificer character who likes to tinker, likes the style that this has of the flintlock pistol. So, this is a flintlock pistol. The Gravity Loader pistol was designed to transport one through the dimensional gap, in turn allowing one to travel from place to place easier while putting great strain on the body. So basically, it folds 2 points in space and time as long as the person can visualize it in their head properly and they can basically make a dimensional door from any location. Sounds pretty cool, and I thought it did at this time as well. It's a +2 magic item, which I feel like makes sense because it's fairly strong, and it does 2d8 because it's a magical gun, and I feel like magic stuff should do more damage than the base longswords that it's like, here's your +1 longsword, it still does 1d6. Like, that's kind of a scam in my personal opinion. So this is where, obviously, it starts to get wacky. Gravity Surge. As a action, cast Gravity Surge, allowing you to shoot a magical bullet from this gun in the area the bullet lands. Create a ball of gravity in a 10-foot radius, causing creatures caught in this radius to gain the slow status effect until they leave the area or the gravity ball disappears. The effect lasts a total of 1 minute per bullet and can be cast 3 times per long rest. I think this is part of the gun that is insanely cool because this is basically just the slow spell. If you read the slow spell like hand in hand, this is basically just the slow spell just put into like a gravity context where the user uses gravity instead of like casting a magic spell. And it's just something that I would probably still keep on the base gun to this day because it's only as powerful as the user really makes it to be. But next up, we got the real wackiness behind this, which is Warp. As a action, cast Warp allowing you to shoot a dimensional portal from this gun. When opened, this portal will cover anywhere from a 10-foot to 100-foot radius of your choice. That is already the first mistake. So imagine, you're in a 60-foot by 60-foot room, and your guy just opens up the entire portal to cover the entire room. Because it's a radius, 100-foot radius, not diameter. So it is massive, especially in D&D terms, because most people don't make their rooms over 80 feet, like ever, like in a radius. And open a portal to a place you are thinking of. In order to do this, you must have been to the place before, and you must take 2 points of exhaustion. And I thought this was the perfect nerf. I was like, you can't spam it because if you get too much exhaustion, then your character will, you know, go away. So you think that this could be balanced in some way, shape, or form, but in reality, it's insanely overpowered, and I didn't realize how until my players started using it against me. So obviously I added the clause you can only use this ability one time per long rest. Now, if you don't know, most of the time to cure exhaustion, it takes one full long rest to cure 1 point of exhaustion, meaning that you can basically use the gun, you take 2 points of exhaustion, you wait 1 day, you lose 1 point, you're still at 1 point of exhaustion, and then you can use it again and get up to three, and then you can wait another day, and then you can get up to four. And then at the four, right, obviously you can't use it again, or your guy will go kaplooey. But it just makes it where they can spam this every single day if they're smart about it, because they don't need to use it every day, right? But they use it in different ways that really stumped me when it came down to it. So how they would use this against me is they would basically go to a boss fight, and if the boss was too hard, they would teleport the boss to a person they know is powerful enough to beat the boss. And logically, like the NPCs that I have wouldn't leave that area, so they have to beat the boss or they're just going to destroy the city. And it got to this point in almost every single boss fight. Now, luckily, the player that did have this gun did try to not abuse it as much as possible, but that didn't mean it wasn't extremely overpowered. And this happened so much to the point where they were fighting the end game characters and they would pull up, they would beat them down, and then they would instantly warp themselves and their battleship across the world to the next guy. I mean, they were speed blitzing the end game demons that I created that were supposed to be like months and months worth of story because I gave them this gun. And it was a huge mistake, and I noticed it pretty soon, so I had to come up with a counter. That is the biggest thing that sucks about being a DM is you have to come up with a counter if you make something like this, or every person in the game is just going to just spam it all of the time, right? So my counter to this was I got Asgaroth, the dragon god of creation, to basically intervene. I had him essentially grab them out of the void at one point and be like, if you continue to spam this, you are going to break the void. And that is the only way. It's kind of scummy as a DM to do it that way, but it's the only way that you can really calm down the game and make it fun and make it fair for everybody, including the DM. Because a lot of DMs get caught up in this where they think the game is only meant for fun for the players, where the game is meant to be fun for the dungeon master as well. And when this was getting spammed all the time, yes, it was my fault, and my players understand why I'm nerfing it, right? Like, I'm not just nerfing it out of the blue. A lot of that really helped, but the game was not fun when this was being spammed, and I think they kind of realized that, which was a W. I still allow them to use this. Basically, they just can't use it back to back to back, or they're going to tear a hole in space-time itself, is how I ruled it. So that way, we're not getting 6 uses over and over again. Because once you get to high level as a player, right, if you have high level healers, they can cancel out exhaustion. So imagine you teleport, you take 2 exhaustion points, and the second that you do, you get instantly healed and you can teleport again. And then, yeah, the healer does have to like wait a day here and there, compared to having the ability to spam teleport is completely different. And then the last thing I add, which I'd probably still have on the gun, is Spatial Splitter. As an action, shoot a magical bullet that does 30d10 to the target when used. When used, you immediately take 5 points of exhaustion and the gun shatters into pieces. This is basically like a Hail Mary. I like creating these in my games personally. I know a lot of DMs don't. It's basically a way where if players are in a situation where they're like, oh no, we're done, we're cooked, then they have a scapegoat that could potentially get them out of it. But a lot of people aren't going to risk the 5 points of exhaustion, because 5 points of exhaustion basically means you are sacrificing your character. And that's the harsh thing behind this, but you should also be able to take out the boss at the same time. Overall, I think the gravity loader is pretty cool. So if I was going to change the gravity loader for today, I would probably change this to 4 points of exhaustion, and I would probably change this to anywhere from 4 to 7 days of a cooldown. And the reason I would do this is just to make it where you can still teleport, but then it's more like, hey, we're going to teleport back to town where we're going to be safe for 4 to 5 days. And then on our journey back, I'll get the revive of this instead of it just being a I can use it today, I can use it tomorrow, I can use it the day after. And if you have a healer, you can use it the day after that and the day after that as well. So this is how I would probably change it. So there's actually a cooldown and everything to this. And if you want to use this, like I said, you can. Like this is 100% free use. I just made this on Google Docs. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Those were the biggest mistakes in my personal opinion that I've ever made as a dungeon master, was just giving overpowered items and the double natural 20s to give you double damage. But let me know in the comments below, what is the worst Dungeons and Dragons mistake that you have ever made personally? And besides that, I hope you guys enjoyed and have a wonderful day. Peace.